nother state. I'm trying to eat down a whole nother plate. Seem like my homies was stuck in the hood. I just told them be safe in the state.
All right, welcome to the Black Miss Podcast. Welcome to the Black Miss Podcast. It is your host, Too Black. It's just me today. I want to say happy Black August. We are always going to focus on issues around prison and political prisoners during the month of August. So today, where our myth is focused on the death penalty, and it's quite simply that the death penalty works. Again, I'm not going to get into a deep intellectual argument here because that is addressed within the episodes. But simply, if there's innocent people on death row, then it doesn't work. And it's really not that complicated. So today we're dealing with the case of Marcellus Khaliifah Williams, who has been on death row for 24 years in the state of Missouri, despite there being DNA evidence proving that he was not present at the site of the crime, therefore he did not do it. So I'm going to more so let the case speak for itself, why the death penalty does not work and why it's a myth that it does. So today we're here with Michelle Smith from the Missourians to Abolish the Death Penalty. She is the co-director of the organization and a major advocate for Khaliifah. I'm going to read her bio here. She is a criminal punishment system impacted advocate, abolitionist, and activist who experienced incarceration during the COVID-19 pandemic, which made her more intimately aware of the dire reality faced by our imprisoned populations, as well as the egregious actions and apathetic behavior by the vast majority of institutions, staff, and administrations. Her existence with the intersections of being Black, a woman disabled, systems impacted, and experiencing generational poverty are the foundations of her ideological work, which is rooted in advocating for those suffering and struggling with a society created, built, and carried out to oppress, marginalize, and dehumanize targeted vulnerable communities. So again, we're going to be interviewing her about the case of Marcellus Khaliifah Williams, or as they call him, just Khaliifah, and just going over the origins, what happened, and most importantly, what you can do to assist. So even if you're not in Missouri, there are petitions that you can sign and things of that nature to assist, and all of that will be available. All of that is available in the show notes. Real quickly before we get into the interview, I do want to shout out the patrons. So we had Matthew Watkins. We had, looks like Gianna. We had MC. And I think then we had Kat. I might have named Kat last month, but oh well. So shout out to, I'm glad to see people are continuing to sign up. Despite all the different transitions that have gone on throughout the year. So thank you. And we just had, I'm recording this late. We just had someone, David Worsley. Looks like they're a free member, but I'll still shout them out. Looks like they just signed up as I was talking. So shout out to y'all. And other than that, again, we're going to talk to Michelle Smith, also known as ML Smith. And we're going to get into the case of again, Marcellus Khaliifah Williams and the total injustice that he's experiencing. And his court date is set for September 24th. So I rushed very quickly after I did this interview to get this up. So I want people to, again, head to the show notes and fill out anything you can to help. We'll be back with another episode interviewing the Pendleton too, and I have more things that you can do to help for that. Again, I thank the audience for being supportive and not just supportive of this show, but supporting the causes that we attempt to uplift. So without further ado, I want to get to the interview.
First, I am ML Smith. I am co-director of an organization called Missourians to Abolish the Death Penalty. We are the statewide entity in Missouri that fights to end the usage of capital punishment, aka the death sentence. And I am, born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. Even though our org is statewide, we do a lot of traveling across the state. Do some other traveling as well, right? And I am impacted by the carceral system myself, and a lot of my loved ones are impacted. So these issues are definitely personal to me. And so that's kind of how I even got into this work, just, being impacted myself and getting connected with this work and knowing people who were on death row. I didn't know them personally, but I knew some cases. So it was something that was honestly right up my alley when I was, getting into the space. And so I've been here for about 3.5 years. And in that time, I've seen a lot of horrible things that our system has done to poor people, be it Black or white, but definitely marginalized folks. So, yeah.
No, thank you for that. And you said you've been doing this work for a few years. What is it about the death penalty that drew you to the work? Like, could you provide a brief argument as to why your organization not support the death penalty, or even you yourself? Because again, we are talking today about someone who was on death row. So some people might say, he's innocent, so he shouldn't be killed. But it sounds like you have a broader, I guess, analysis of the death penalty, and you are in opposition to it, even if someone did, quote unquote, commit the crime. So if you would just like to lay that out for us.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, to Black. And I hear that a lot, right? Well, I understand it in this case, but in other cases. And I often have to explain to people that's not how the system works, right? The system doesn't say, if you don't think this person deserves this or that person, the system is here to control, to punish, to incarcerate, and to kill. So it doesn't have those nuances that regular people may have. So that's kind of the answer that I often give when presented with that particular question. But overall, yes, so our organization is against the death penalty. We do something called attrition, meaning that we try to chip away at like the pieces that go into capital punishment. One is mental health issues, right? There was a case in our country where it was called Atkins v. Virginia, where they said we are not going to execute people who are mentally ill or intellectually disabled. This is a case out of the Supreme Court. But we know that, a lot of times our governments, they don't necessarily abide by those rulings, but that is what the Supreme Court ruled years ago. And so we are trying in our state to codify that into a law that says if a person has an intellectual disability or a severe mental illness, we call SMI, that they should not be on death row. And there are people that have been executed who have such such disabilities or mental illnesses. And so that's one thing that we're working to chip away at. So also these cases like Khaliifah's, we're going to talk about innocence cases. Bare minimum, we shouldn't be killing innocent people, right? But because the system is flawed, I think sometimes when people look at a case like a police brutality case and they can see the wrong and it's like, oh yeah, that's bad, right? But they get to have meandering thoughts and nuances when it comes to another issue. And the death penalty is one of those things where, it either is or it isn't. We have it or we don't. And so because the system is unfair, because it is prejudicial, it's biased, right? It's racist, right? Our criminal legal system I'm talking about. Because the system is not perfect, we should not practice something that is permanent, right? You can't come back from death. So we believe that we should not have this as punishment. Now, when I talk to people sometimes about the death penalty, and this is funny, but people forget that prisons exist. Like one lady I was speaking to a while ago and talking about why I don't believe in the death penalty. She's like, well, what are we going to do? There's just going to be one running around. And I said, you know, the prison there, like the prison don't disappear because ain't a death row, right? There is incarceration, which I am an abolitionist. I don't necessarily personally believe in prison, but my point is it is there. It is there to do what, keep these people away from society, which is what
and it's not like when you are on the death penalty that they kill you the day you get put in prison. You're often there for decades.
Decades.
So,
The average is 20 years. So people are incarcerated for 20 years before an execution. So so that's kind of, we have to understand that this system is its own beast, it's its own monster. It doesn't have the logic we have. It doesn't have the emotions we have. It doesn't have the feelings we have. The system is there again to punish, to oppress, to control, right? To torture, to torment. It's not actually there to have a logic system that says, well, if a person is a serial killer and killed 10 people, it's okay to kill them, but nobody else. That's not how it works. So there are
Right.
serial killers that do not get charged with the death penalty, right?
Right.
Um, Even people often talk about like Ted Bundy. Oh, Ted Bundy, he got executed. And I learned a few years ago when I started doing this work, Ted Bundy was actually offered a life sentence in Florida. He wouldn't plead guilty because he had some, narcissism and his ego, etc. So he would not plead guilty. But the prosecution actually, they didn't want to go through the whole process of a trial. So they said, hey, you plead guilty, we'll give you a life sentence. He just didn't accept it. So even in his case, being a bad serial killer, right? He was
Right.
offered. So I talk to people about those nuances and how the system isn't perfect, and so we shouldn't be practicing this if the system isn't perfect. And Khalifa's case is a perfect example of what I mean when I say the system isn't perfect. It doesn't make mistakes because this system doesn't make mistakes, but it does wrongfully convict people who don't have the means to, have a robust defense, right? We ain't all OJ, right? We don't have the greatest. We ain't got Johnny Cochran. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
He's not here. Rest in peace. But so when you don't have the means to have that adequate, that robust representation, you're often convicted wrongfully or over sentenced. There are people that are also over sentenced. So I don't think that the death penalty should be something we practice because it is final and our system is flawed. And so those are the main two reasons, why I take that stance.
No, thanks for that. And I think that's good to lay out because I think people have this idea sometimes, some people at least, like you were saying, that there's the bad guys, quote unquote, air quotes for those listening, are the guys who the system will automatically catch. All of the people that in this fantasy world we all universally agree are terrible and they do heinous things, and then everyone else will just either go to jail or prison or get on parole or probation or pay a fine. And like you said, that's not how it works. And we need not get into all the reasons why. For those who listen to the show, they know, but that's not how it works. So more than often, you have people who are just swept up into it, and before they could even run these DNA tests to even check, you didn't even have the DNA to exonerate people. In many cases, it would just be on some prosecutor's whim, and somebody just sat there and they got put on the death penalty, before that technology entered in. Not that that always works either, but I'm just saying, like, that's the situation. So it's not, I understand people who think certain folks need to die. I actually think you make a good point, because even if you feel that way, that almost has nothing to do with the death penalty, right? So, yeah.
It has nothing. I tell people all the time when they talk to me, I got to ground folks, right? To like really got to ground people. And this is what I say. You not the system, right?
Right.
If people try to look at me like, oh, you're not the system. You're not the prosecutor. You're not the court system. You're not the prison system. You are the individual. You have feelings. You have emotions. You have thoughts that are your own, but you are actually not the system. So the way that you feel personally, I've actually talked to victims, family members who are suffering and they're grieving because they lost their loved one, and I understand that because I my own life, right, have had loved ones who were not here because of violence. But I tell people, regardless of the way that you feel, you're not the system, and the system is going to do things because it is like the system actors career aspirations, right? Political. Our attorney general, we had an attorney general in our state who does things sheerly out of political gains. So your thoughts and feelings and emotions are not the system. And when your thoughts go against the system, because there are victims' families who don't want the death penalty.
Right.
I was telling this story the other day. There was a man executed in Texas, and he was 19 and he was on drugs. He had a severe drug problem, and he went and basically robbed his great aunt, who I believe she was in her 80s or 70s. She was an elderly person, and he robbed her. And however it happened, he killed his great aunt under, this haze of his drug addiction. Okay.
Right.
So Texas convicted him, put him on death row. Now the victim's family is also the defendant's family in this case. And after years, the family will visit him. He found, religion again, and his family facilitated all of that, and that was their process of healing, right? And after, the 20 years of being on death row, and they scheduled his execution date, his family went to the governor and said, "Hey, he's our family, and the victim is our family too. We don't want him to be killed. We don't want to lose another family member. We have forgiven him. He's in prison, but we don't want him to be executed. We still want to be able to visit him, and he is a part of our life." Texas basically told them, "The hell with what y'all talking about," and they killed that man. So it's not even about what the victims want, because if the victims don't align with the state ain't listening to you. So I really tell people, you are not the state, you are not the system, you are an individual. You feel how you feel, but the state is not necessarily going to align with your motives, or or your emotions or your feelings. So that's definitely one of those things I have to deprogram people from thinking, because it's not true.
No, that's a great analysis in the because I think we watch our cop shows or our Law and Orders or our crime dramas or whatever, and we get emotionally attached, or like you said, in real life, like somebody did something to you or did something to your family or whatever, and again, that's more real than obviously a TV show, but it's still it makes you the arbiter of the universe as far as like what's justice and what's not, and like you said, that's not even really relevant other than the state's ability to sway public opinion or to get people on their side, but as individuals that's not even really relevant. So you can't have it one way and then have it the other way. Like, no, like you said, death penalty is a catch-all thing. So if you believe in it, whoever gets thrown into that is on death row. It doesn't matter.
And also, real quick, it's trauma. Like the families, I've sat in courts, right, during trials. And of course, during the trial, they show the gory pictures, the pictures of bodies and blood and, et cetera. And this family have lost their loved one, a couple years prior. They got to sit in this courtroom and relive their trauma and look at and I mean on the big screens. I ain't even talking about a little bitty screen. They're on the big projector, the pictures of their loved one's body parts and blood everywhere. And they got to sit in court and watch that just to convict the person and just to put the person who did it on death row. That's unnecessary, right? Why are we re-traumatizing victims' families just to get this political ends of a death sentence when it was possible to go another route and not even, put a person on trial, but not seek the death sentence? So I think that the system re-traumatizes people to the point where they've accepted the way that the system works, but that does not have to be. You don't need to be traumatized like that. It is possible to get justice, accountability, etc., without traumatizing victims' families and the years of trauma. Like they got to go back to court, 10 years later, because the person has an appeal. So it's literally decades of trauma that families are subjected to, and it's truly unnecessary. So that's another aspect of why people assume certain things, but it's not true, and why we need to challenge the way that our capital punishment system is able to perpetuate those lies.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. I could go on. I could probably bring you back just to talk about death penalty, but what we're obviously here to talk about is a very specific case, Marcellus Khaliifah Williams. So I guess just to kind of start off first, who is this person? I think it's always good to know the people and not just turn them into avatars or anything. Like who actually is Khaliifah, like just a bit of his background, or even who he is currently and who he's become, I should say. Before we even get into the case, could you just give us a bit of that?
Sure. So, Khaliifah is a resident of St. Louis, Missouri. He was born actually in another state, but he was raised here in St. Louis. And, like a lot of young Black men had, some trouble in his early years. But in the year 1998, a horrible murder happened. And it was horrible. I don't try to take away from, crimes that happen and horrible things that happen to people. So it was a very horrible murder. The victim was Mrs. Khaliifah Gale, and she was killed in her home. And the case went cold for over a year, right? There was no suspects. At least the police hadn't arrested anybody, hadn't, really brought anybody in that they had a serious suspect with. And Mrs. Gale's husband decided to offer a $10,000 reward. And so, when we're talking about money, right? When money come into play, people start talking. So after this $10,000 reward was announced, the news ran a story about it, etc. And there were a couple of people that came forward that said Khaliifah told them that he killed this woman. And this is the way the system works, right? They latch on to a witness, a snitch, informant, whatever we want to call the person, and just run with their story just to get a conviction. And that's what happened in this case. And you mentioned DNA a little bit ago. I kind of wanted to talk about that too. So in Khaliifah's case, there was DNA evidence, and the trial happened in 2001. So by 2001, DNA testing, was a thing. It was, used pretty regularly. And there was blood evidence, there was a murder weapon, there was a lot of evidence left at this scene. So during the trial, of course, Khaliifah's attorneys asked the court to test the DNA, right? I mean, logically, that would make sense. But I want people in your audience to understand evidence doesn't just come into court just because you have it, right? It has to be accepted in the court. And sometimes the prosecution, depending on what the evidence is, will argue against allowing it to enter into the court record. It's just like your alibi. Just I got an alibi. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean that that person, that alibi witness or whatever the case, is going to be admitted into the court record if there is, a challenge to it. And so they challenged the DNA evidence, testing it. It was, evidence that needed to be tested. It was challenged. So the court denied the testing. Khaliifah was convicted mainly on the testimony of these two witnesses.
So the court did not. So the evidence was there, and the court denied the evidence, or they just denied the testing.
They would not test for DNA. They denied the DNA testing during this trial.
What's the reasoning for that?
Honestly, and I haven't read the transcripts back to that point, but a lot of times when it's this particular, adversarial situation, the prosecutor and defense, the court weighs heavily on the prosecution side. That's where the bias comes in. So whatever and at that time we had a prosecutor who is not there now, but this is a person that put a lot of people in prison wrongfully convicted. This was also the person who wouldn't charge the cop who killed Michael Brown Jr. This is a person who, just had a lot of death sentences. He actually tried to get 29 people on death row. He was a very horrible person. He still is. And so he argued against bringing in the DNA evidence. And the judge agreed. And it doesn't make any sense to us today, right? Again, the system ain't us. So common sense would tell me test everything. Let's see what's happening. But the court is not us, and the court doesn't have that kind of sense. So it was not tested. Khaliifah was convicted. And for years, his attorneys fought to get this DNA tested. Finally, in 2015, he had his first execution date was scheduled. And his attorney said, hey, can we stop and at least test the DNA? Like, let's not risk killing an innocent person. And our state Supreme Court in 2015 did. They stopped the execution. It's called a stay. So they stayed the execution and ordered the DNA to be tested. So from 2001 to 2015, they had fought, and finally they were able to get the DNA tested. So the DNA tests were ran in about 2015, 2016. And when they, had the experts review those results of the DNA testing of the murder weapon, and some other material that were at the scene of the crime, it wasn't Khaliifah's DNA. And it wasn't the victim's husband's either. So it was obviously a third person, right? Some other person in the home. Now, when that DNA was tested and came back as not being Khaliifah, guess what? The attorney general with the state attorney didn't want to discuss the DNA, didn't want to admit it in court record. Basically, our attorney general hasn't even for real mentioned the DNA testing because it helps Khaliifah. Now, had that DNA test came back matching him, you know, the AG would have ran with that. They would be talking about it right now, right?
Right.
But because it doesn't match him, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to mention it. When they do interviews, they won't say nothing about it. They don't want it in court. It's a fight to get the DNA in court. And also not just in court. Guess what? Like I said, it matched somebody. It hasn't even been given to like the FBI or the police to run through the system. They got databases of DNA, right? To match people. It has not even been that process hasn't happened because the state attorney doesn't want it to happen. And the state attorney has been fighting all these years to make sure that this DNA evidence stays out of the court record, stays out of being ran in the system, and they just really want to forget that it exists or this testing was done.
What is the reasoning there? Like they don't want to look bad because I read through, I didn't see that part that the court denied it. I just assumed that eventually they got the DNA ran, but just saying the DNA was suggested to be ran at the very beginning of this. The court did not do it. And so they would have to own that effectively, right? Yeah.
You know, there is something called a doctrine. It's a legal doctrine. It's called the finality of judgment. And of course, I'm not an attorney and I'm not, you know, pretending to be, but I read a little bit. And basically, when a conviction is had, so basically when a jury of your peers, and I'm air quoting too for people listening, a jury of your peers makes a decision, come hell or high water, they're supposed to stick to that decision. The jury could not have gotten all the evidence. The jury could have heard informants who lied, whatever the case. But the system says if a jury has decided it, it is stone. It's set in stone, and we ain't trying to change it. So the finality of judgment is basically saying this should be final. We're done with this. We have a conviction. He was found guilty, and the sentence should be carried out no matter what new evidence comes forward. And there's no other reasoning behind it. They're saying that, you know, the victims need their justice. Well, yeah, the victim family does need justice, but this ain't the justice because this isn't the person that killed their loved one. But that is the logic of the system, which to me and you know, we sitting here like that don't make sense, which it doesn't make sense. But that's what the system does. So just because there is a conviction, the state attorney wants to stick with that conviction no matter what. And Khaliifah's attorneys have been fighting for years. So thankfully now this is his third execution date that's been set. So currently he has amazing attorneys with the Innocence Project, and they have been fighting to get the case in court. Now we have a new local prosecutor, right? Because the state attorney is one entity. The local prosecutor took the case on, reviewed the DNA.
This is Wesley Bell, right?
Yes. Who
just took out Corey Bush. Just want people to know that for people who are listening. Yeah, the APAC money and all of that. Yeah.
Yes, that is the political landscape that we're working in. Yes, and that's a whole nother story. But
we don't have to get into it. I just want that on record. People can.
Correct. He is, and he did. And I tell people I'm appreciative that his office, you know, his staff, because I'm sure he has staff members. He and his staff reviewed the case and saw that, you know, this evidence did not match Khaliifah, and they had, you know, the decency and the common sense, et cetera, to bring the case forward. So we definitely appreciate them doing that. And in our state, we have a law that says a prosecutor can ask the court to reopen the case. And so that's what Prosecutor Bell did. He asked the court to reopen the case, and the court, the local court, set a date for August 21st, which is the week of next Wednesday. The morning, I think at 9 or 10 o'clock is the hearing. And that will be the first time in 24 years that the court will actually review the DNA testing results, right? Which is about 10 years after the testing was even done. But this is the first time that the court will review it. But guess what happened after the judge set the date of August 21st for the hearing? The attorney general, our state attorney general, he ran to the Supreme Court and said, hey, I don't want that hearing to happen. Stop it. saying that the local court doesn't have like jurisdiction anymore. So basically, it ain't none of y'all business. He told the Supreme Court to tell the local court it's not your business. But guess what? The local court convicted him, right? He was convicted in a local court. So the local court, this is their business. Thankfully, the Supreme Court told them no, they're going to have that hearing. So ultimately, what is going to happen Wednesday the 21st is what his attorneys, his family, and he have been working for and hoping for and putting in all of these years of work to get this evidence in front of a judge. And I'm looking forward to the hearing. And so I decided to have a rally of support that day of the hearing, which is the 21st of August around noon. And it's really just to bring community out to say, hey, Khaliifah, we support you, right? Khaliifah is a person incarcerated who is an imam. He is a mentor. He is, all the other men look up to him. He's very much respected. He's also a father and a grandfather. So we want as a community to come out and say, we support you in this. And also we support you in your humanity, your right to live, and your right to live free because you're innocent. So we're going to hold a rally of support outside the courtroom and we're bringing other exonerated people out, a couple people who've been exonerated from death row themselves, and to talk to the crowd and really just, plead for support, plead for solidarity. We have a lot going on in our society overall, but I think that this is a case that we can get behind and say, it is not okay to kill Khaliifah. He's innocent, but also this death penalty should not exist because of things like this. It's flawed, and this person should not even be facing a death penalty.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, and nor should he be facing life or be in prison at all, right? Yeah. So I guess with this trial on the 21st, this or not trial, this is just a review. I don't want to say trial.
Evidentiary hearing is what they call it.
There will, if the result, what could the potential results be? Like, what are the options here?
Well, so I mean, honestly, there's not a lot of options, but the best option is this judge. Now, also, he probably won't make the decision that day. We would love if he said, hey, Khaliifah's innocent, go home, right? But that's not how the system works either. Mm-hmm. So the judge will take the evidence into consideration. There are going to be the experts testifying, et cetera. So the judge is going to review all that information. He knows that there is an execution date a month away, September 24th. He's aware of that. So he's going to take that all into consideration and make a decision. And that judge's decision can be, yes, Khaliifah's innocent. I'm declaring him exonerated, free him from prison. That judge's decision could possibly be he needs a new trial, right? Because this hearing is only a one-day evidentiary hearing. It's not a whole trial, right? So that a judge's decision may be, hey, he actually needs a new trial. He didn't get a fair trial. All of the evidence didn't come in, so let's actually hold a new trial. Or the judge can, side with the state and say, oh, I'm going to disregard the evidence and you go forward with the execution date. That's definitely not what we want. At this moment, I'm hopeful that will not happen. We are all very hopeful that all of the work over the years that these attorneys have put in will, be fruitful and will eventually lead to Khaliifah's exoneration and release from death row before he's executed. So, it's even after the court hearing, it may be a little waiting game. I definitely will be, stressed. And interesting enough, Khaliifah is not stressed. He is very faithful. He's Muslim. He tells me Allah got me, and I believe him because I definitely, respect people's faith. He's not afraid of what's happening, and he thinks the process is going to turn out the best way it's supposed to. Me, I'm a little more fretful, right? But that's probably why I got those gray hair. But I am hopeful that, that it will come out in the best way and that Khaliifah will be saved. And so we're asking folks to go to freekhaliifah.org and sign up to come to the rally if you're in St. Louis or Missouri or surrounding states. People are driving in. Some folks are coming from Detroit. We have some people coming from like Memphis, Oklahoma City have some folks coming in, so people are driving in. We're trying to accommodate people. We got some hotels and that sort of thing that we can accommodate people with. So we're just asking as many people to come out and support. And again, it will be a rally of support. We're not protesting anything, because I told someone recently, we ain't got nothing to protest right now. This is what we want to happen, right? We want this to go forward. So this is honestly support. We can come out and we can, chant free Khaliifah and we support you, whatever, but it's definitely going to be a space of just community coming together in support of a person who deserves all of that plus more. And I also want to let you know real quick, Khaliifah, Khaliifah. So freekhaliifah.org is the website. And we appreciate people sharing. If you can't come, share on social media, right? Your TikToks and your Instagrams and Twitter, Facebook. I call it Twitter because that's what his mama named him. So that's what I'm gonna say. But share on social media. And also, you know what? Talk to your community, right?
Right.
Talk to your people, talk to your church, your family, your college. I talk to a lot of college kids, I talk to a lot of churches, I do a lot of that, but people can do it too. And just talk about how, even if your family, the myths we talked about in the beginning about, only the worst people get it, etc. Talk to your family about the fact that none of that is actually true. And we have innocent people, we have mentally ill people, we have intellectually disabled people, we have children of the cutoff is 18, but there are people who have been executed that did something when they were 19 years old. I know somebody who did something a week after he turned 19 and he was put on death row and executed. So let's have these discussions in our community about how we keep ourselves safe and how we don't need this horrible system of capital punishment in order to do that.
No, thank you. Just a few more questions if you have a little more time. Yeah, so we'll come back to, I want to reiterate the action steps people can take, but just coming back to again, kind of who Khaliifah is, and also like what drew you, like how did you learn about this case? Because clearly he's been in prison for over 2 decades. Like what kind of brought you to this case?
So Khaliifah is honestly amazing, but I'll talk about how I came into this work, in this space, in this case. So like I said in the beginning, I am formerly incarcerated myself. And sometimes people don't believe that, right? Because people have a myth, a view of what people in prison are supposed to look like. And I don't know, I don't know what that is, but I have been incarcerated more than once, actually. And so when I came home, back in 2020, during the height of COVID, I came home from prison. And a few months after I came home, now I was doing some advocacy work, in my free time. I had a regular job, but I would go to our state capitol and I would talk about my experiences of being incarcerated, especially as a woman. And so I would do that. So a few months later, someone reached out and said, hey, this organization that fights against the death penalty is hiring. And I'm like, interesting. And like I said, we've had a couple pretty, popular or, well-known cases of people on death row out of my city. So I knew what death penalty was. I knew Missouri had it, right? I said, oh, that's interesting. So I was like, okay, and I applied for the job. I didn't think I would get it, because I don't have any kind of criminal justice degree, or I don't got any PhD in anything. So I wasn't sure, but I would get it. But I did the interview, and it went well. I was offered the job. And so I've been here for about 3.5 years. And and for my first probably few months, all I did was read, right? I know sometimes we assume, or some people assume, being formerly incarcerated, having been in prison, means you automatically know what you're doing in the movement space, or you're an expert at prison, the system. You're not. You're just a formerly incarcerated person. So I actually sat down and read. I started reading not only case files, like the Atkins v. Virginia ruling. I started reading Supreme Court rulings. The ruling in 1972, 1976, that reinstated the death penalty. I just started doing a lot of reading, a lot of research. Started reading, different books. Of course, I have to, give my thanks and appreciation to Baba Mumia. Everything he's written has, guided me and just taught me so much. So I read a lot of his work. So just really reading and understanding what the death penalty actually is. Because I was against it, right? But getting the language to be able to educate others and talk about it, that was a process. So I
Right.
started learning. And so after a few months, in our state, we connect with the people on our death row. I know a lot of states, like for instance, Texas, they have over 100 people on death row. So it's hard for the organizers can have a personal relationship with 100 people. But in our state, we actually have under 20 people on our death row. And I reached out, started connecting with people. And the first person on death row I connected with was Khaliifah. I, wrote to him. I put him on a little email app thing, and I wrote to him. He replied, and I sent him my phone number, and he called me, and we, started having different conversations. His knowledge is above me because, like I said, he's Muslim. He's an imam, so he talks from a very faithful place, but just like very above me, right? I'm a regular person, I got petty side and all that, right? But I'm just keeping it real. But Khaliifah is very level-headed, and he has just his wisdom. So, we would talk about just a lot. Even lately, we talk about Palestine, and we talk about the issues in our society. We talk about all of those things. And so over the last several years, we've connected and spoken. And I remember once the first when my hair was dyed, right? So when I first dyed my hair years ago, I thought I was cute, right? I'm like, oh, cute. So I sent a picture of my hair to several friends in prison, right? I sent it to Khaliifah too. He's one of the friends I sent it to. And he calls me, he's like, what's wrong with your head? I'm like, I dyed my hair red. He's like, okay, because he bald, you know what I'm saying?
Right,
So
right.
it was funny. I was like, I think I'm cute. Like, can I be great right now? But he's an amazing person, and I've learned a lot from him and other people on our road. And I've really, gotten, to be, I can't say the greatest friends, but like very respectful of them, very admirable of them. Like I said, Khaliifah's had 3 execution dates, and he's still level-headed. He's still wise as he always has been, and he definitely has an amazing perspective on what's happening to him and also with the system as well. And I really appreciate that. So, I'm thankful that I'm in this space to do this work, and I'm really honestly, really blessed that I know there are some amazing people that are incarcerated in this country. And
Yeah.
so I'm thankful to know several of those people, including Khaliifah, who is also lastly a poet. So he writes some amazing poetry, and we put together a collection of his poetry. So we're doing some poetry shows, and some people are going to be reciting some of his poems. So his poems are very insightful as well. So it's just a blessing to know him, and to be in this space, of just being able to connect with him. And I take my work personally. It's not. I tell people all the time, it's not just a job. You know what I'm saying? Like, I do this for real. I say all the time, because people assume it's your job, whatever. I'm like, listen, I do this for real. I'm just not here. Yeah, it is a paycheck, it ain't the biggest paycheck, but I do get paid and pay my bills. But
Right.
like, I'm dedicated to freeing my people from cages. That's what my dedication is. And I'm just really thankful to be able to be in this space and to be able to do that and to know great people like Khaliifah. So that's kind of how I got into the work, how I met him. And I met some other people similar ways of just reaching out. And they allowed me to come in. Because, when you reach out to somebody in prison, right, it's not a given that they're going to be receptive. You know what I mean? It's like they might not want to talk to you or may think you have ulterior motives. So, I was thankful that, the people that I have connected with see that I am genuine in my concern, in my work, and that they allow me to connect with them.
No, that's beautiful. It's also just dope that that was the first person you connected with, or the first person you reached out to, and here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, because so
Interesting.
that was through the organization that did that. Can you say the name of your organization again, just for people?
Sure. Yeah, so the org is called Missourians to Abolish the Death Penalty, and it's MADP is our acronym, MADP, and on socials it's MADPMO. And so, yeah, so well, you know, being formerly incarcerated and having loved ones, I connect with people in prison, like my own loved ones, my friends that are still incarcerated that I knew. So I know a lot of people, you know, in our state, not just in our state, across the country, honestly. So I know a whole lot of folks who are incarcerated. So, you know, now they have mostly the email system. It's called JPay or Securus. So they have like an email system. So I have an account. Yeah. So, you know, you add them to your account and you reach out, you know, and so I've been able to connect with a lot of people incarcerated. Not just people I know personally, but, you know, just in my work overall, been able to connect with a lot of people. But yeah, MADP is our organization. And, you know, that's what we want to do. We want to abolish the death penalty.
I guess like we tend to talk about the United States and we'll say mass incarceration and you know and we'll just talk about it just generally, but what is it specific about Missouri that people need to know that's different than just, I'm not saying it's exceptional, every state has its own bullshit, but I'm saying, but what is it about Missouri specifically that people need to know in regards to these issues that you fight against, and maybe even more broadly? Because I know, just like being in Indiana, there's things about Indiana that are just different than they are somewhere else, and vice versa. But what is it about Missouri?
You know, it's interesting, and I recently found out that you live in Indy. There's something that Missouri and Indiana have similar, and it's horrible. Like it's horrible. But well, first I'll say this. So let's start out grounding. Missouri is the South. I don't care where it's geographically located. I don't care if it's next door to Indiana or Illinois or Kansas. Missouri is the South. And I say that because when you look at our statistics, the data, our incarceration, our policing, Missouri has more in common with Alabama, Texas, and Louisiana than it has in common with Illinois, Kansas, or Nebraska. That's just the reality of the situation. Not just incarceration and policing, but poverty, you know, all of the things in social services, et cetera. Missouri is very much a southern state. Missouri was also the last slaveholding state, officially, right? Missouri was the last slaveholding state. So we have a lot of that ingrained, deeply inset racism and prejudice. To this day, we have sundown towns in this state. There are places in this state, if I don't know somebody there, like going to a specific place and know somebody, I'm not even driving through, right? So Missouri is very much that place where it is reminiscent of Louisiana, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. So I just
which have some of the worst prisons, especially Louisiana, but all of them.
Very much so. Angola and Parchment in Mississippi. So Missouri, and I was actually in New Orleans not long ago talking to somebody that did work, and we were talking about our death rates in our prison, and like Louisiana at that time had like 50 more deaths in their prison that year than Missouri had, but Missouri has over 100 per year. So it is very much a southern, you know, I call it the most northern southern state. So that's kind of the grounding of it, right? But getting back to Indiana, there is one thing we have in common. So there are two phases to a death penalty trial. The first phase is the guilt phase. So basically finding out, you know, is the person going to be found guilty by the jury, right? And the evidence is heard, the witnesses, et cetera, and a jury will come back, you know, yes, we all find this person to have done this, he's guilty, or she is guilty of this particular murder, this crime. The second phase of a trial is the sentencing phase, meaning once you're found guilty, now what sentence will you get? In our state, it's a death sentence or it's a life sentence in prison. Those are for the capital cases, those are the two sentences. And that sentencing phase is kind of like a trial again. That, you know, that some of the victims' families are heard, you know, some of the evidence is heard about, you know, the aggravating circumstances, et cetera. And in that second phase of the trial, the jury again has to, you know, determine your sentence. Now, in Indiana and in Missouri, that determination does not have to be unanimous for the person to get a death sentence. Meaning, if the jury comes back and says, even though we found you guilty, 9 of us want to sentence you to death and 3 of us don't. 3 of us think you should get life, or vice versa. 9 of us want you to get life and only 3 of us want you to get a death sentence. That non-unanimous jury in other states, that would result in some kind of mistrial.
Yep.
They would have to have the hearing
hung
over
jury.
again, right?
Yeah, right, yeah.
But in Missouri and Indiana, a judge can take that non-unanimous verdict and make the decision themselves.
I didn't know
The
that.
judge can say, okay, even though y'all didn't agree, I'm gonna go ahead and get that person a death sentence. Or last year or 2 years ago, a judge in a non-unanimous jury in a sentencing phase gave a person a life sentence, right? So it can go both ways, but the judge has that ultimate power. We don't believe a judge should have that ultimate power.
No.
If we want to have a system where somebody's life is on the line, which I don't agree we should, but if that's going to be our reality, let's make sure a jury unanimously comes to that agreement, right? And so in Indiana and Missouri, a jury can be non-unanimous in a sentencing phase, and a judge can give a person death sentence. So that's something that we are trying to get rid of, and we're trying to get the law passed. And you know what? You know how that happens in our law? It's a comma. It's a comma in the statute, in the wrong place. And the way they interpret it.
That's it.
Right,
In both states? In Indiana too? In Indiana too, was that simple?
You know what? I don't know what y'all statute. I haven't looked at your statute. I just read that Indiana does it too. But our statute has a comma in a certain place where they have interpreted to say a judge can do this. So we're actually trying to pass a law to get rid of that comma.
So there's really not much basis for it legally.
No, at all. Not at all. Yeah. Not at all. It's court legal arguments is all it is. So that's kind of the reality of Missouri and our death penalty. But it is a state where, last Friday was a 10-year anniversary of the murder of Michael Brown Jr. And that person was never held accountable. Like I said, our state local prosecutor, previous one, he was very much a person who loved the death penalty. St. Louis County and St. Louis City are ranked in the top 10 counties nationwide that have given out death sentences. Top 10 counties nationwide, right? And of course, all the other counties are places in Florida and Louisiana, right? So Missouri we're always at the top of bad list and the bottom of good list. Always.
That sums it up. Yeah.
Yeah, for real. If it's something good, we're at the bottom. If it's something bad, we're right at the top. But sometimes I want to leave the space, right? But somebody got to be here to fight.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I feel similar about Indiana sometimes, and then sometimes I just want to leave.
Right.
But yeah, the only thing that keeps half of these states anything decent is the price of living sometimes isn't as high as it is, and in some of these, I guess, better, quote unquote, better places, right? But it's all the United States at the end of the day. So,
exactly. Yeah.
But I do think it's important sometimes. There's a way we just kind of will say that, but it's like there is something about living in a particular place and knowing how that place works. Especially if you're trying to organize, like, as you know, it's not, you can't just go read a booklet and just walk into any, like, there are very specific elements and things to deal with. So I think people need to know Missouri is its own thing. That people say it's the show me state or whatever, but it's its own thing. So
it's misery. I call it instead of Missouri, I call it misery. I call it misery. Great state of misery. But the people, we got good people here. St. Louis, in my home, Kansas City. I love my KC folks. So we got some amazing people. We got some amazing organizers that came out of Ferguson, right? A lot of those people who are great. So they're doing some amazing work here. So we got a lot of great people here, a lot of great organizers. And we're gonna keep fighting. We can't give up. So we're gonna keep fighting. We're gonna keep fighting for Khaliifah, keep fighting for people in our East Cages across our state. So we're gonna keep up the fight.
No, thanks for that. I guess just to close out, and then if you have anything else to say, go ahead and say it, but just close out with, again, can you run through the information and what people can do to help with Khaliifah? And this will be out as soon as I can get it out. But what can people do to help with Khaliifah? You know, people who obviously probably are not going to all be in Missouri or something. What can people do to help?
Yeah. So I will say, you know, use the information that we put out to educate yourself and then educate those around you. That's the biggest thing we're asking folks. Like I said, freekhaliifah.org is the website. And again, his name is spelled Khaliifah. We have a toolkit. That's as soon as you go to the website, the first button is the toolkit, and the toolkit has like links for graphics, captions for social media, right? So if you don't know what to say, you can copy and paste the caption and take the graphic and stick it on your Instagram feed. You can also follow MADPMO on all socials as well and keep up with what we're doing. But it's definitely about educating those around you and speaking up. And I know people say all the time, oh, it's just social media. But guess what? Social media has moved issues, changed narratives, and educated people. And I know it's a lot of mess that happens,
Right.
but those are also spaces where, you know, people get support and people rally around different people and different issues. So definitely would love for people to amplify Khaliifah on their own socials. Send it to your friends. You know, if you have somebody with an influential or a huge platform, send it to them, ask them to post it and talk about it. We have a video up on our page on TikTok. Look, I'm old TikTok, but TikTok page as well. There's a video of one our young organizer talking about Khaliifah's case. You can go and stitch that right and kind of expand on it as well. So we're really just asking people to amplify the case, amplify this injustice that's happening to Khaliifah in any space you're in. Like I said, college, churches, classrooms, social media, anywhere that you navigate, please share the info. And if you can, come to St. Louis next Wednesday. We'll definitely love to have you for that rally to rally around Khaliifah in support and yes, stand, present. Hopefully one day we're going to talk about how so many people came and, and all of that precipitated Khaliifah's exoneration and freedom from incarceration and a death sentence. So I would love to be able to celebrate with people then as well. So pull up if you can, but if not, like I said, amplify it, talk to your community, talk to your people. If you have connections to people with other YouTube shows, etc., you can talk. It doesn't have to be me, right? You learn about it. You can talk about the case as well. But people can also DM me at MADPMO, and if I'm able to hop on and have a conversation with your group, I have no problem doing that either. So just whatever you can do in any way that you can do it, we will really appreciate that support.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I encourage everybody to go out and do that. And again, people listen to this show have heard about the Pendleton tool and a few other cases, so you know that we are all for advocacy, for people behind those cages. It's really grunt work because, I remember somebody once, I think my OG once told me prison was just hard to organize, but he was like, it would be a good place to go because there's not a lot of money in it. So you don't have to deal with as many grifters as you do in other scenarios. You're gonna have to deal with them, but not to the same scale. Because there's not, it's really hard work. It doesn't have as much of the maybe instant gratification that some other things do. You just like you said with Khaliifah's case, you have to fight for half the time he's been locked up just to get them to review the DNA. And then it's been another 10 years. That was what, 2015. So we're almost at another 10 years for the DNA to actually exonerate him, right? So that kind of has a way of weeding out people, and not all of them, but it weeds out some of the worst because they're not those kind of people don't stick around for 10 years, right? So
you're right. Definitely a space where this ain't the high profile cushy spaces, right? People ain't on CNN and what I'm saying, and podiums behind at these big panels and whatever. But we're trying, like I said, we're here, we've been doing it consistently. And a lot of us are formerly incarcerated. A lot of people that do this work are formerly incarcerated. So we are definitely trying to make a mark. And it's a lot of us. There's so many people in this country that have a criminal history. Us getting together, people power, right? So we believe that we can make a difference if we unite and bring our people power, bring our skills and talents to this work. So, but yeah, it's not one of those spaces where you finna get on and you finna be great. We actually work over here. So yeah.
Yeah. Between any interview, that's the easiest part. But all the stuff you got to do to even get to the interview, that's. So definitely appreciate it.
Background. I do a lot of
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even know what I look like. A lot of times people meet me and they're like, "Oh, that's you." I'm like, "Yeah," because I do what I do. In the background for the most part. When I gotta come, even when I do come in front of a camera, I done did months worth of work. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the culmination of 6 months worth of, So yeah.
Yeah, it's reaching out to folks. It's even to know the case, to learn new angles of a case. I got some stuff I got to read after I get off here. Like it's the writing you have to do, all the different stuff. Yeah. So definitely appreciate it. Definitely respect it. As someone who doesn't do anti-death penalty work, but definitely works with prisons or works against prisons or works with prisoners. Definitely respect that. Definitely. So yeah, I encourage everybody to go, fill out the petitions, fill out everything. Everything will be in the show notes. So everything will be available for you. Again, thanks for coming through. Definitely appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you so much. You have a good night.
Free Khaliifah.
Free Khaliifah.
Okay. Fresh out the plane in a whole nother state. I'm trying to eat down a whole nother plate. Seem like my homies was stuck in the